This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. The Nebraska Supreme Court Friday upheld the path of the Keystone XL Pipeline to cross Nebraska. The Omaha World Herald reports the alternative route picked by state regulators was challenged in 2017 by tribes, environmental groups, and landowners. The ruling comes as energy development was a topic this week at the Frank Lemire Native American Presidential Forum in Iowa. Some candidates pledged to oppose Keystone XL, while others said they'll consult with tribes. Meanwhile, a federal judge in Montana will hear arguments on September 12th on the merits of a lawsuit brought by tribes against President Trump. The Rosebud Sioux Tribe and Fort Belknap Indian community hold the president violated treaties, issuing a permit for the Keystone XL project. TC Energy has asked Judge Brian Morris for dismissal. Victoria Wicks has more.
Wes Furlong is an attorney with the Native American Rights Fund. He says this case is about enforcing the Fort Laramie Treaties of 1851 and 1868, which were designed to stop tribal resistance to settlers traveling the Oregon Trail and building the Transcontinental Railroad. In exchange, the United States agreed that immigrants would stop polluting the water, depleting game, and destroying the terrain. Furlong says construction of the Keystone XL pipeline threatens Indian country in the same way.
The potential of leaks and ruptures of the pipeline will have impacts on their water, on their land, on their other treaty-reserved resources for hunting and fishing, on their ability to access game and fish.
TC Energy replied in briefs that the presidential permit allows passage into the United States for only 1.2 miles at the U.S.-Canada border, and so the president's action has no effect on Indian country. TC Energy has wanted to start construction while the lawsuit plays out. Wes Furlong says tribes oppose that proposition. In North Dakota, the Dakota Access Pipeline was under construction while opponents had active lawsuits to stop it, and it was all but completed while waiting for its final federal permit to cross under the Missouri River.
That was very important for the tribes to get out ahead and bring this challenge and bring this fight before construction happens so that sort of situation doesn't happen again.
In another lawsuit on October 9th, Judge Morris will consider imposing an injunction to halt construction until lawsuits are resolved.
That was Victoria Wicks. Gila River Indian Community Governor Stephen Roe Lewis asked Democratic presidential hopeful Julián Castro if he'll uphold the Indian Child Welfare Act if elected to the top office. The tribal leader posed the question to Castro this week at the Native Forum in Sioux City and says it's important for all candidates to know about the law.
Native children were taken away from their families and adopted outside of Native communities at such a disproportionate rate to any other racial and ethnic group. That's why the Indian Child Welfare Act was passed by Congress. We have to find out exactly what are the policy implications of these presidential candidates in regards to their platforms. Do they ultimately support ICWA, and do they ultimately also support like-minded nominees to the federal court and ultimately to the U.S. Supreme Court that would protect Native landmark laws?
Castro says he wants to strengthen ICWA.
I would make sure that folks know that I support the Indian Child Welfare Act as president, and go out there and campaign on how important it is to preserve it and why it was necessary in the first place. And as you say, even today, these stereotypes, these caricatures, the disregard for Native peoples is still too prevalent in many quarters.
Governor Roe Lewis says the law, which is intended to keep Native children with Native families, is under attack by the adoption industry. An appeals court recently upheld ICWA after a federal judge in Texas ruled it was unconstitutional. I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Kawanak Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
For Native Americans affected by domestic violence, the Strong Hearts Native Helpline offers peer-to-peer support and resources. It's safe, confidential, and toll-free at 844-7-NATIVE. Program support by the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center.
And by the law offices of Sonosky, Chambers, Saxe, Miller, and Monkman, a national tribal rights law firm with offices in Washington, D.C., New Mexico, California, and Alaska, and online at sonosky.com.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.